And the thing is, it's always in that little thing in
the Shoal Creek.
Shoal Creek, in that little room. And
Why do we need them?
it's really, it's
I don't understand.
Oh, it is. You know, it's just not the same people. There's not, a lot of people. I think you saw a real decline in small clubs.
I would like to announce that a quorum is present, the meeting is duly called, and notice of the meeting has been posted in accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act. In order to maintain social distancing and other health protocols at public gatherings, a limited number of staff and community members will be in-person attendees at today's board workshop. The following board members are in attendance: Tracy Miller, Allison Lasan, Angie Cox, Christy Hassett, Jenny Prosnick, and Catherine Sells. I've asked board member Tracy Scott Miller to say our prayer.
Thank you, President Sells. Let's pray. As we've just celebrated what many of us believe to be the resurrection of our Redeemer and ultimate hope, many of us proudly say, He is risen. Father, you've called us to serve. You chose us. You called us for a purpose of stewarding LISD. The community should expect that we govern openly, fairly, honestly, compassionately, thoughtfully, and with kindness and equality, regardless of our politics, faith, or foundational beliefs. I passionately and unashamedly confirm that this is what we have done. Like many of my colleagues on the board, over the last few weeks, we've had dozens of conversations with weary parents, opinionated parents, and in some cases, parents who've lost hope. We know that parents are tired, teachers are worn out, staff that's ready for a respite. The biblical metaphor here is that of Moses, who, as he lifted his arms, his warriors were winning the battle, but as he grew tired and let his arms down, the enemy began to prevail. So his friends helped lift his arms, and the battle was won. We ask, Father, that you use us to help lift up the arms of weary warriors in our community. As the conversations with parents consume our time and attention, that we will provide them some hope and comfort. So many people want to know what next year looks like. So do we. But we ask, Father, that you bring to us and our community patience and kindness as different ideologies collide, as what solutions families feel are best for their students, and what staff members might think is best for them in a safe and secure environment. The exciting thing is there's a new day coming. Through the gift of common grace, we have a vaccine, we have momentum, and most of all, we have hope. Hope in a new day. For this, we are thankful and celebrate. Father, I pray for our nation that we come together. For the sake of what is good and decent, that we come together. I pray for our state legislature that they make decisions that support education, freedom, and equality. I pray for our cities that this election cycle will be civil and raise up or reinforce strong leaders. I pray for the LISD election that the same will be true. I'm grateful that we work the work you've called us to do, and I'm steadfast in what we continue to work as a district and a board to promote the strong student outcomes, to promote equity and equality, and to take seriously our role of governance, advocacy, and student achievement. It's out of a grateful yet often weary hearts that we serve like Moses. We also ask that for us and our staff that you send those to lift us up as well. In closing, Father, I would recognize that while not everybody may celebrate the faith and victory I opened with, and that many of us at this table have, that one thing is true, that we believe that each member of our community is created in the Imago Dei, meaning your image. And it's because of that, what you've done for us, and our strong belief in the fact that we serve tirelessly, passionately, and with great hope for what is to come out of a tragic and difficult year. Solo Deo Gloria, to God be the glory. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. We will now convene into closed session as authorized by Texas Government Code Section 551, specifically 551.074, and the time is now 6:04 p.m.
Okay. Yeah, where my good mask?
You want
Hello.
Hello. I don't like the boxes.
We will now reconvene into open session. The time is 6:11 p.m. Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance and the Texas Pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible. Would someone like to make a motion considering the action of items discussed in closed session? Our first agenda item, Ms. Lasan, thank you.
I move that the board approve Miss Adrienne Mendez, did I say that right? Okay, good, as Lewisville ISD's Assistant General Counsel as recommended by administration and a personnel selection committee.
Okay, and Ms. Hassett has seconded that motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 6-0. Perfect. Ms. Mendez, would you like to come up and bring your family?
Congratulations.
Sorry, we're going to put you on the stick. Adrian, I know, first off, congratulations. But I know you have some folks here. So if you want to
Come on up.
and then introduce them, and we'll get a picture, and then you can get out.
Come on.
Come on up.
Don't be shy.
She is a 10th grader at Mansfield High School in Mansfield ISD. My mom's Sel and my dad Chris.
Welcome.
On that box.
Okay. So
There you go.
maybe someone will talk.
Yeah. There you go.
Yay. Oh, that looks good.
I was about to say, I'm smiling.
We'll do mask, and then we'll step out of the way, and if y'all want to take your mask off, that's great.
All right, here we go. Ready? Hard not to start to smile.
I'm smiling underneath.
Okay. Okay, now we'll just do.
Ian and I'll move,
Yeah.
and you can take your mask off.
Now you're really gonna have to
Dark?
smile. Everybody strategically get their masks. Y'all are on.
It sounds like a good excuse as any choice.
It is.
All right, everybody smile. Good enough. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome to the family.
Nice to meet you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for being here. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
All right, moving on into our agenda. Dr. Rogers, we've got our LISD Four Cornerstones.
Thank you, Ms. Sell. So our cornerstone tonight is about student experience. I nurture each learner as an individual and as a citizen of the community. And our I statement following that up is find and promote students' passion and interest, which, the board's absolutely been a part of allowing staff and our community to try to expand options and opportunities for our kids, and we greatly appreciate that support.
Perfect. Persons desiring to address the Board of Trustees had the opportunity to fill out a speaker's card. There were no speaker's cards filled out tonight. So moving on, discussion items. Dr. Rapp?
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I'm not Dr. Rapp, but this really is a pretty short thing. We did, for the past several weeks, as we promised that we would bring back to you, the board, sometime in April, we worked on what should the minutes of instruction look like for next year. And so it was a pretty obvious decision not to keep 25 extra minutes a day. That was a real easy one. So then the question that we discussed before we even put it to principals was, do we want to go back to what we were a year ago before COVID, and that was 435 minutes a day? Or would we want to take this opportunity and possibly consider going to 440? In other words, leaving 5 of those minutes. And so after we sort of looked at the options and the pros and cons, and of course I know all of you understand there's a lot of different factors that come into this, like transportation, food service. I mean, it's a lot of moving parts. It's not just, and of course trying to keep it to where we're not picking up elementary kids 5 minutes earlier because they're already getting picked up early in the morning. And of course anything you add in the middle of the day extends the middle school schedule, which is already way late. So after all those considerations and talking with our principals, it was very obvious and really provide some consistent answers that really they would prefer to go back to 435. And so that is our recommendation. That's our current plan, is just to go back to the schedule the way it was before this year. So I don't know if you have any questions, but that's our plan.
Do any of the trustees have any questions, Ms. Crosby?
I want to clarify, our STEM elementary academies will still have the extra 25 minutes, correct?
Yeah, our STEM, this year when we extended, the 25 minutes, we did not extend the STEM academies, so they'll stay at the 25 extra, but just like they were a year ago.
And this is, I know it's only for a few campuses. How does that affect our total number? Because that is an extra 25 minutes for it will be 5 campuses next year. Does that affect our total minutes at all? Or
No.
I'm excuse me for not knowing the exact language in the TEA. I'm just
Yeah, and
curious.
I'll double check with, but I don't think the STEM, those 5 STEM or 4,
Yeah.
there's going to be 5.
Yeah,
Them going 25 extra minutes, that doesn't help us banking minutes. It has to be a
it
district-wide.
has to be a district-wide.
Yeah.
That's just
I was looking at the 2 experts over here to make sure I wasn't wrong, but, so, anything else?
Ms. Hassett?
I would like to add a note on next year's academic calendar that we're reverting back to the 435, just so when parents pull up the calendar that they know that's the old time frame.
Yeah, that's a good point. And we'll make sure, when we communicate this out to through social media and whatever, to make it clear we're going back. I promise you our staff's going to be paying attention to it, so we'll make it clear on that.
I know it also says we're going to be conferencing with transportation on times. When will that?
We're not going to change the times.
So we were going back to what
Going
they
back
were.
to the times.
Got it.
So all that will remain the same.
And the start times and end times will
Start
revert
times,
back.
end times, just like we were 2 years ago, 2
Okay.
school years ago.
Any other questions, Mr. Miller?
Yeah, President Sells, I want to position my comments in the context of a future agenda item. So no reason for anybody else to comment, but I think that what this, of course, I support this, whatever action we have to take. It does start to lead us down a path of making decisions for next year, and we're very aware that a lot of people have questions of what next year looks like in a number of dimensions. And so, Dr. Rogers and President Sells, as you consider future items for work sessions or whatever, I know there's going to be, we've seen interest around vaccination requirements, et cetera. I would just ask that as you guys come up with a calendar, for myself, I'm not in a hurry, so whatever you think makes sense based on the experts that you're talking to. But the public will start to see us making decisions like this for next year and say, oh, well, what about this? What about that?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Miller. And certainly during April's, next week's COVID-19 update, and then particularly May, we'll try to provide as much clarity as possible. As y'all know, we've tried to do that with parents that have reached out. Hey, how do I fill out this survey when I don't know what August looks like exactly? And the answer is, I don't know exactly what August looks like 4 months from now. If the trends continue and we are working on what those trends look like, and they're all good so far, let's hold our breath after an Easter holiday that they continue. And of course, the great concern right now in our country and even in Texas is what the variant is doing, particularly in younger, 20 to 29 in that age group. But we expect for things to return, much more like it was 2 school years ago. I can't lock that in yet, but we'll continue to inform.
Thank you.
Any additional? This one. Okay. Moving on.
It is Dr. Rapp.
Yeah, I was looking at you real quick. Okay, Dr. Rapp.
All right, so I'm going to ask Mr. Kosh and Ms. Clark and Dr. Miller to come up. We have a presentation for you this evening. Restorative practices have come up in several previous presentations that we've made to the board, and so we felt like it was a good time to have a review, a refresher, if you will, of where we are with restorative, what that looks like, and what we're thinking moving forward. So I'll turn it over. I believe, Dr. Rogers, are you saying some words before Ms. Clark starts?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was just going to say, when we've talked about this in the past, it's really easy to get sort of pulled down that rabbit trail that, okay, hey, some teachers I've talked to or some parents I've talked to misunderstand what this is. And, of course, I try to remember and remind you, we've had 41 campuses that have been trained, but being trained up until this point didn't mean all of the staff on that, so a high school being trained, it might take 2 years, 3 years. Now, good news, Ms. Clark is going to report is we're getting close to all of those 41 are actually all trained, the staff. Now, of course, the turnover is a different item, but we just want to clear up again for you as you're having those conversations, once again, what we're trying to accomplish with restorative practice. So.
And you've got a copy of the presentation as well in your folders.
All right. Good evening, everyone.
You might pull the mic close.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to talk with you tonight. I was looking, and I think it was back in 2018, the last time that I got to speak with you about this. So I'm glad to share some updates with you. And I wanted to start just with our cornerstone focus. I do believe that the work of restorative practices touches all 4 cornerstones, but the greatest emphasis happens to be in what Dr. Rogers pointed out this evening with student experience. And I noticed, that is where we see so many of our I statements that directly correlate with this work. So I wanted to do just a little bit of review with you guys on restorative practices. So TEA has actually been promoting the idea of restorative practices in schools since 2015, including some efforts to extend training statewide. The initial focus of TEA's efforts really was on discipline. And the key priority of restorative practices, when we think about it, is building and maintaining positive relationships and repairing those relationships when harm is done. So an approach to restorative practices that focuses only on discipline keeps all that emphasis on the relationship between administrators and students. But the most powerful relationships a student should have at school are with those teachers with whom they spend all day, each day. And so our training provider was actually one of the first providers of this restorative practices training for TEA, and they've adapted the training to offer a more proactive approach that moves past the discipline piece to really emphasize empowering what our classroom teachers can do and what tools they can use to build relationships and create that positive learning environment. So just a reminder of where we are with the training. We started our first official cohort in the 2018-19 school year. We did the training in August with 22 schools. We did cohort 2 in 2019-20 with 19 additional schools. Then I think we had 16 schools ready to go in 2021, and we were delayed by COVID. The training is very powerful face-to-face, and we just didn't have any good options at the time for a virtual scenario that we felt comfortable with. So we did not do a cohort 3 this year, but we are super excited to be planning that cohort 3 for the upcoming August. I actually have been working with our provider this before we went on break for the long weekend, and it looks like we're going to probably train between 18 and 20 schools. We're doing a little bit of a hybrid training model where we're going to have some pieces virtual with video, but we're going to have small groups with lots of face-to-face, hands-on, with trainers present. So I'm very excited to be able to resume that. And we still think that we can stay on track and get all campuses trained by August of 22-23. That is still our target. We're planning to train every campus except Lilly. And even our career centers will be trained as well. Okay, so from the last time I talked with you, these are just a few review pieces reminding you about just the key concepts. Remembering that restorative practices is all about prioritizing those relationships and the connection that our students feel to their school community so that there's inclusion and belonging to support that best possible learning experience. I also want to just remind everyone about some of the misconceptions with restorative practices. This is not a substitute for traditional discipline. It should not be viewed as a soft approach to misbehavior problems. It isn't a program. It really is a mindset, a way of thinking about how we work with our kids. And there's also sometimes a misconception that this is for certain students from certain backgrounds or in certain schools, and that couldn't be further from the truth. Every student in our district can benefit from this approach in our classrooms. Also, just a review from the last time I was able to speak with you, here's some of the outcomes that we expect will be supported with the work of restorative practices. I won't read all of those to you, but just remembering that building those relationships and those connected communities where we gain that deeper understanding of other cultures, our own and others, can definitely improve behavior in the classroom, reduce repeat offenses, and really allow that protection of instructional time. All right, so what is involved in the training? A lot of times when we talk about restorative, we keep thinking about discipline, but the training that we are implementing on campuses for all of our staff is actually not really about discipline. It's about that restorative mindset, the idea of building those positive classroom relationships, and then empowering teachers with the tools to do that. So when we do the training, we train all campus teachers, so professional staff, without regard for what their role is on the campus, all counselors and all administrators. And if the principal would like, we also train the ISS aide because that's a very important environment to be promoting that restorative practices mindset. I wanted to share with you just one example of a tool. This is one of the things that teachers learn in the training, is the idea of a treatment agreement. And this is actually built by everyone collaboratively, all the students and the teacher together. It provides a framework for the class for the whole year ahead of how they want to be treated and how they agree to treat each other, both student to student, student to teacher, and teacher to student. This is really powerful because we're asking our kids to be respectful in classrooms, but this gives them a voice to express how they feel respected as well. Very powerful. So that's just an example of one of those. If teachers use this tool with fidelity, then everything that's going on in the classroom gets pulled back to that, both in terms of what we expect and how we fix it when people don't meet those expectations. So last year, we did our first survey to try to get some measurement of what the impact was of restorative practices on our campuses. And we surveyed only the campuses who had already participated in the training. It was voluntary. We encouraged people to participate, but we didn't force it. So out of that, we had 14,000 students participate and about 1,400 staff members. And with the students, we only surveyed grades 3 and up. And so we'll use this survey going forward as a way to have one measurement aspect for what restorative practices is doing on the campuses. And the questions really focus on relationships, engagement, behavior, and connections. I'm going to share just a few snapshots with you. So one of the questions asked students, how would you describe your relationship with teachers? And you can see from that data overwhelmingly the vast majority of our students report experiencing a positive relationship with most, all, or some of their teachers. Always some room for growth there, but I thought that was a pretty encouraging statistic. Also from the student voice, this question was about connection and inclusion, whether school felt like a place they belonged. And you can still see here that the clear majority feel positively about being connected and included at school, but again, still room for improvement because we do want to work toward all of our students experiencing that connectivity. And then looking at the teacher voice, this question mirrored the student one about relationships. And the teacher questions were structured with intentional language about restorative practices, where the student was more about perception. Teachers, we asked them using those tools intentionally. So in this one, how did it impact relationships? And again, overwhelmingly, a large number agreed that it had a positive impact. This question was about the impact of restorative practices on engagement, and a large number reported that they felt that using those tools increased engagement, rising all the way up to over 70% of the elementary teachers reporting that they saw a connection. And then the last question here is about behavior. And so the teachers were asked on a range from limited to significant impact of the restorative practice tools on behavior. And so you can see that 80% plus of our teachers reported at least some level of impact, whether that was small, moderate, or significant. All right. So just kind of switching gears a little bit, because restorative practices definitely are connected to discipline, so I do want to touch on that a little bit. We are really committed to the idea that restorative practices will not replace traditional discipline. And when I talk with administrators and when our leaders talk with administrators, that point is always made. We are committed to the idea that traditional discipline is and will always be part of our classroom. But what we have to acknowledge is that traditional discipline alone is not working at improving behavior for some of our students. And if we're doing the same thing over and over and getting the same results, we have to ask ourselves how to approach the challenge differently. So for some of our students, pairing traditional discipline with restorative practices, or even in some cases using restorative practices instead, may get us to where we want to go, because what we really need to look at is, why is the student behaving that way? Are there skill deficits? Are there factors in their lives that we need to address so that we get to that outcome that we want? I wanted to kind of show this to you. This is one of the training tools that we use with our administrators, where we talk about, just like everything else we do with our students, managing behavior has to have a differentiated approach as well. We can't just say, you did this, here's your punishment. We still have to look at it through the lens of, what is the outcome we want for the student and everybody impacted by the misbehavior? What does the student need, and what strategies are going to get us there? If I've sent a student to in-school suspension 6 times and he does the same thing again a 7th time, I don't think just sending him to ISS again is going to fix that problem. We have to look a little deeper. And you can see some of the strategies that administrators might use. I love the first one. I mean, it is amazing how many of our students don't really grasp how to make a genuine apology or even understand why that's important. So one of the things a restorative discipline strategy does is help work kids through, who did you impact and what can you do to fix that? And sometimes an apology is enough. Sometimes it's not. Some other things we do, obviously, we can do mediation in circles. Restitution, I'm very big on restitution. How can you make it right? If we recognize that a student does not have the skill to cope in a certain situation, we've got to build that skill up. We've got to close that deficit. And then ADAPT is one of our best tools for restorative, because you're really working through how to improve outcomes for students. Just as an example, here's one of those strategies. This is called a repair action plan, where it actually gives the administrator a tool to ask specific questions to students and to work through the conflict. This is a great tool for conflict. So a couple of pieces of discipline data. One of the things that we want to look at, and we've kept focus on, and I talk to administrators a lot about, is, we talk about DAP quite a bit, but we also just need to look at out of placement in general. Every time a student is removed from their regular classroom, they're losing some of that quality instructional time. And so that needs to be one of our targets. And you can see how flat we were. When we look at these 5 years from 2016 to 2019, the number of students who had 5 or more out-of-placement actions in that school year stayed pretty consistent. And we saw a very noticeable drop in 2020. Of course, the first thing I thought was, well, it's COVID, right? It's hard to put a kid in out-of-placement when they're all home starting in March. But I dug a little deeper and kind of looked at the quarterly averages, and it still is a statistical decrease from 2019 to 2020 when we just look at the total. And unfortunately, we actually did put a few students in DAP after closure. Sometimes students do things outside of school that leave us little choice. All right, and so looking a little bit at DAP, I also looked at some trends. I looked at this as a cohort, so looking at 2 years at a time, how many students went to DAP more than once in a 2-year period? So we looked at 2016, 17 to 17, 18, 18 to 19, and then 19 to 20. And that was a steady decrease, which I was very pleased to see that. That's something we've been working very hard at, is reducing that DAP recidivism. And again, thinking about the COVID impact of 2019, 2020, but we did send students, to DAP even during that month of closure. And statistically, it was still a reduction looking at quarterly averages. And I think Mr. Kosh is going to speak to these next couple of slides.
So you talk about effective teachers and classroom management, and I'm going to draw your attention to this study that was put out there, and really that middle paragraph there I think is the important part of this. Over-referring students to the office can weaken a teacher's influence in the classroom. Forever, administrators have always been wired to support teachers, support the classroom. And forever you would maybe hear something along the lines of, I hired you to teach, I'll take care of the discipline. But that's a risky situation, because you start to lose the influence. That teacher who is with that student time and time again, behavior after behavior, shouldn't really give away their authority of that classroom to help change those behaviors. And then so you have the combination of things that we do here in LISD, and Ms. Clark mentioned it, to where we're still holding on to that traditional discipline, but that coupled with the restorative practices, the relationships that are built between the teacher, the organization, the structure, the expectation, allows for some reflective practices to happen with the administration and the teacher. So not necessarily questioning them on what they did in the classroom, talking about the teacher, but being reflective with them about what can be done differently so that we can get a different outcome. Still holding true to the traditional discipline, but then embedding those restorative practices in order to see that change of behavior with the student.
And so just making some connections here, this graph really focuses in on all the different programs, initiatives, services, opportunities that our students have, all working towards that same central goal of a positive learning environment. And while we're aligning with our cornerstones, we're also looking at what are these tools to support that learning environment, whether that's looking at our Kindness Matters, whether it's all the SEL levels of support that we do, All these things come together, cultural proficiency, with that same central outcome in mind. And the more that we can empower our teachers and our administrators to build those relationships, the safer and more inclusive our classrooms will feel for students. And that is going to naturally lead to a reduction in misbehavior and better learning outcomes. That is all I have. Dr. Rogers, did you want to add to that?
Well, I would just say first off, thank you, Ms. Clark. You know, for us, I think it's a great accomplishment that, you know, we're close to having all our staff trained in restorative practice. You know, to me, it's a proactive approach versus discipline, and I promise you I've handed out lots of discipline in my 35 years, but is reactive, you know, and so I think it's a great mix. Have we perfected it yet? No. But, you know, I'm extremely proud of the efforts to try to really, you know, we want to serve kids. As Rebecca mentioned at the first, some of our kids don't know how to maneuver through these things because they haven't been taught at home. And we think that that's a simple thing, but it's not, you know, and all of us as parents understand how difficult it is to and then you have kids that don't have some of that support. And so I just think it's important, and I appreciate the board's support for it, and I understand the difficulty in trying to wrap your head around it and, you know, the different perspectives people give on it. But anyway, I think it's anyway, we're headed in the right direction on that. So, with that, they'll take some questions.
Okay, we'll start with Ms. Hassett.
I have three. Ask them all or just one at a time?
Let's just do one at a time on this first round.
Okay. My first one is, I think the survey. Is that my first question? Are you going to repeat the survey again?
Are you going to
repeat and redo the survey?
Yes, ma'am. Our intention is to do it annually. And I didn't mention this earlier, but what we did with the survey data last year was I broke it out so every campus could see their individual results, and then that leadership could look at collective data as well. We'll continue to provide that to them. I think it's very important for them to use in with their CIPs, and also just with planning how restorative practices work will roll out. We do offer them coaching opportunities with this work, and that data is real key in helping them figure out where they want to focus efforts.
Mr. Miller?
Oh, I'm trying to get it down to one.
Well, we can come back.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we'll come
so
back.
this is, again, you guys have done great work, great progress. I mean, I remember us meeting in the think tank on this, you know, and it's been a key priority for Dr. Rogers since he became the SOUP. And there are a couple of things I would just like to say. Dr. Rogers kind of touched on this. What's not in and I think this falls under our two domains of governance and student achievement, because it's a means to an end, right, as it relates to student achievement. There's not a lot of discussion about the parent, and here's what stands out to me. We had a session a couple years ago. I can't remember. It was a cultural proficiency thing. We had a lot of people come. It was at the Hilton Garden Inn, and we had a speaker. I won't mention who the speaker is. And one of the things that as he talked about this type of thing, building a relationship with students, like you guys talked about in the classroom, etc. He intentionally said, and I don't want to talk about the home. And it seems to me, like Dr. Rogers said, that a key element of this for repeated behaviors is what we're doing with the parents. And you may not have the answer tonight, but something to think about. What we're doing with the parents to help them. You know, sometimes parents are just too early or too young, or, you know, could be older and just don't know how to parent. And quite frankly, discipline is a cultural and generational issue. I'll guarantee you the way that I got disciplined as a kid, ain't nobody getting disciplined that way that I know of, right? There's no belt snapping, right? That's the way it used to be. And so I get that there's a softer approach in general to discipline, and you had mentioned something about this is not intended to be a softer approach to discipline. It's supposed to be kind of an augmentation. So that's one where in the future I'd like to hear a little more about how we might be partnering with parents where we have some repeated behaviors, especially when you got multiple placements at DAP in the same year, right? At that point, it seems like there's an important conversation with parents. And I believe, unlike that speaker, that what happens in the home is as important from a parental or custodial perspective. And this is where one of the things we do really, really well is, what are the programs that Monia and Jill do?
Adapt.
Educating, the parent, education programs. This is one where I think there could be some things like that that are helpful.
Ask an expert.
Ask an expert type thing, right? So what my kids get repeated, behaviors, they always get sent to ISS or, there's probably some, simple things that could be done in partnership. That just stands out to me because of what we've journeyed through the last several years. So,
And Ms. Clark can probably fill in the blanks on this, but if used correctly, the ADAPT program, when a student is referred to the ADAPT program, there's two pieces to it. It's the student counseling part that takes place, but then there's also the parent side of it separately, and then they come together. Probably not as in depth as the expert probably could roll out there, but the ADAPT program does offer the parent piece to the student behavior.
It requires the parents to participate.
And I'll also speak to, I do think that this is an area of opportunity because the more we can partner with our parents, the better results we're going to get. One good example of this is our Bridging the Gap meetings that happen at DAP. So every student who is assigned to DAP, when it's close to the end of their placement, the campus schedules what's called a Bridging the Gap meeting. They invite the parents, of course the student, staff from DAP, the home campus counselor or administrator comes, and they all sit together and they talk about the situation that resulted in the student being at DAP, a little bit of accountability and what kind of harm was done, and then the student talks about the goals that they have to move forward and not repeat that. And so there is a very strong parent component to that piece with our DAP students.
okay, thank you.
One of the things I was going to ask actually is, what is the ADAPT program?
So the ADAPT is 3 sessions. It's with our counselors. So they do it after hours, and there's 3 subsequent weeks. It's about an hour and a half, I believe. So it's a group activity. So if one parent and student shows up, they're getting one-on-one. If 5 show up, it's a group. The student group goes with one counselor, and the parent group goes with another counselor. And they talk through things like choices, responsibility. With the parents, one of the things they talk about is setting boundaries. And so they have some established curriculum. So they start out together, they break out, and then they come back together. And campuses are empowered to offer this not just as a discipline option, but in other cases where they're seeing some struggles. But one of the things they can definitely do, and I encourage administrators where they're telling me there are so many gaps here for this kid, I'm looking at putting him in ISS, but I'm really struggling with how to help him. I always say offer ADAPT instead of ISS. Say if you'll go do these 3 sessions in a row, then I won't make you do the ISS days, because that is going to benefit the kid way more in the end. Sometimes they'll do it like we one of the things we offer at DAP is if you go to ADAPT while you're at DAP, you can get days off of your placement.
Okay, cool, thank you. Ms. Cox?
Well, I hate to admit this, but I am a huge fan of restorative practices and the ADAPT program. I've gotten to witness it firsthand, and it is an amazing program. I mean, it brought tears to my eyes witnessing firsthand just the transformation that happens from that ADAPT. I wish it was a 6-week, 12-week program, because honestly, it could use more, but you truly saw parent and child transformation happening just in that short amount of time, and those counselors are phenomenal. So huge shout out to them. I'm a huge fan. But my question is, it's kind of a 2-part. You didn't say we couldn't do that. is how long is the training program for the teachers, and then what is the continuing training? Because we can't just stop at this. I'm sure there's some more things that are added. So what does that look like?
Definitely. So the training itself is a full day training. We usually start about 8:30 and go till 4:30. It's all day long. I ask the campuses to feed staff so we don't take long lunch breaks. We try to capitalize every minute. The trainer's original program was a 2-day program, but I don't feel like that's reasonable both as a resource stewardship angle and also asking campuses to give up 2 days of their August in-service. That's a lot. So we work to tailor it to a 1 day that really fits us. And so that's the initial rollout, is that full day training. And then every year since we've started this, I provide a refresh training for the campuses. So I'll prepare ready to deliver learning opportunities that they've been around 2 hours that principals can take and do with their staff, that has some engaging activities, some refresh of the learning, and they do that in August to just reboot the training in their folks' minds. And I also offer them some pieces throughout the year that they can integrate at staff meetings or when they have their PLCs, so I give them some small teach pieces as well. So I'm supporting kind of that ongoing piece after. I work with Dr. Miller's department as well to kind of, they help me with ideas and structure and strategy. And then as we make new hires that come into campuses, what we've done historically is in September, I'll offer some in-person training, and campuses who've already had the training can send their new hires so that we get them up to speed with the training. And Dr. Miller and I will kind of have a long-term plan for that once all of our campuses are trained so that we capture all our new people as they come in. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Prosnick?
Mine's a two-parter too. My first question is trying to understand the discipline graphs. Is that the entire district, or is that, so that's the entire district?
Yes, ma'am.
I would be very curious to just see the discipline data from the 41 campuses that have had the restorative practices training.
And we can
I think that would be a little bit more impactful for me.
We can certainly look at that. There's a lot of data crunching that has to happen to get to those numbers, so I will enlist my partner, Kathy Bray, in that effort to help me.
She'll have it done in half an hour. No, I'm teasing. Because I think that would speak more to the effectiveness of the program than looking at it district-wide, especially when we're looking at well over 28 campuses who have not had the opportunity for training.
I would like to modify Mrs. Prosnick's request. Shocking. I'd actually like to see campuses that haven't gone through the training as a baseline before they go to training, and then also to break it out between the campuses that have.
But that would be the 2016, 2017 data, because we didn't have it then.
Right. But then throughout the years, as we have been trained, how have we been improving with students throughout the years as we have been? So I think it'd be great to see long-term efficacy models with that.
We'll work on crunching some more numbers for you, no problem.
I'm sure Ms. Bray is thrilled.
Ms. Bray just threw a dart at your picture.
Sure.
Did you have another question?
I did have one more really quick question. It was a quick one. I just can't remember it. Can I get a copy of the study? Do y'all have that study? The Strong et al. Study from 2003?
Yeah, we'll provide that.
Thank you.
Any other questions down here before?
Whoa. Ms. Sells, you get to ask a question first.
Yes, well, she went, and so I've got three. I was going to hold on to mine till the end and just wham them. Yes. So just for transparency, because these documents kind of show that the district started working on it in 2018, 2019, but we really started before then. Can you talk just a little bit about that? That was when the training began. But the district has been working on this for some time. Can you just talk about the beginnings of that so that we're not getting lost in, well, the district's only been doing this for 2 years or 3 years or something like that?
Definitely, and I may not correctly quote the year here because the work started before I came into this role with just a look at our discipline data and where the disproportionality existed and what are some strategies. It was in line with what the state was doing in that introductory slide. So we responded to that, and there was some work with campuses purely from a reactive restorative discipline standpoint with a special emphasis on the circles, the restorative circles. Honestly, I don't know how well that was really received across the district. and this isn't pointing fingers at all, but there was no substantial training, and there wasn't a lot of laying foundation of the why and the mindset, which I think are so important. So when I came into this role and I started talking with other people who involved other leadership, really kind of trying to figure out a better entry point, and we met the training group that we use, the proactive piece was so much more powerful. So we did bring them in 17-18, and they trained all of our campus administrators at the time in a restorative approach to discipline that wasn't just about circles and responding to discipline. It was that much more whole picture relationship, proactive piece. Even though it was about discipline, there was a lot of proactive pieces. And from there, we decided that working with our campuses at the teacher level to really build that capacity in our classrooms was where we wanted to focus our energy. And I continue to do that work with the administrators from the discipline side, but we're focusing our training, efforts with this on our classroom teachers.
Okay. Thank you very much. Okay. And Mr. Miller?
Maybe you showed us this before, but the paragraph you had on reviewing our restorative mindset, is this the first time you showed us this?
It was in the presentation in 2018.
Okay, that's a long time ago.
It was.
I like it because I've been sitting here rewriting it in my mind to a parent. A child who feels connected at home is more productive. And, there's just a lot of things that go back to that kind of thing. And I think, as has been talked about, we've made great progress. And I think we lead, in many cases, in districts across the state. And the one area that, I'm not so concerned about kind of some of this longitudinal data and going back and that type of thing. That's important. We can see that. Here's the thing that I hear, and I'm not sure the sample size is valid, is that when let's say there's a situation where central administration counselors come to a campus, or whatever the situation is, and they're the runner, and because at that event we talked, the Texas Rangers were at, I'm going to use a baseball metaphor, the tie always, if there's a tie, it always goes to the runner. So in other words, if a teacher has a strong point of view, generally the outcome of the action is going to lean in the direction of the experts. And I just would offer, as we think about that, right, if I get the survey, but we don't see the questions behind the survey and some of the things, are teachers really feeling like, because we know that some teachers feel political pressure to adapt to this, right? Oh, I got to figure out a way not to send them to the office and that type of thing. We know that's going to happen naturally. But it just seems to me the more I hear about when there's a broader group brought in, the teacher's role in this tends to diminish. I mean, they have less of a vote. It may not be true. I'm just sharing with you some examples, right? And so in that, for example, when you mention ISS, if a kid gets sent 6 times to ISS, whose responsibility is it to address that? Is it the teacher's responsibility to address modifications in the classroom? Because I got a feeling that once you get past 2 or 3, there's some bigger conversations we're having before it gets to 6, right? So is it on the teacher? Is it on whatever's going on in ISS? Like, for example, is ISS to some degree restorative? Is somebody in ISS having a conversation with that student about, well, hey, you've been here 4 or 5 times. Here's some practices that might help you, and trying to understand what else might be going on from a social emotional perspective. Does that make sense?
It does. I believe, to answer part of your question, it's a shared responsibility. So the outcomes for our kids behaviorally belong to all of us. And with that said, I do also expect that our campus administrators are leaders in that effort. They have the most training, the most support in that. And when we look at the big picture, and if a kid's experiencing recidivism, if they're experiencing chronic misbehavior, we have to all be on board. And sometimes that's going to look like talking about what's going on in the classroom in a way that differentiates for optimal success for that student. It's going to also look at some consequences, because you are not going to sit in a classroom and disrupt learning or impact safety, and that's a non-negotiable. it's going to also look at who's going to do the restorative piece. And I think that restorative piece happens in the classroom with the teacher, and it happens most often when we're responding to misbehavior with the administrator who takes those steps. And you might see some of that in the ISS classroom, and that's one of the things on my work to-do list is to how can we improve the environment of the ISS classroom so that it is working towards those outcomes. But ultimately, our campus leaders have to take responsibility for leading the efforts of everybody towards that outcome.
And
I was
Go
going to
ahead.
say,
I was going to say that the administration also dives deeply in with the parent and guardian at a certain point. They don't take them out of the equation because obviously something is transpiring over and over again. Yes, administrators call home and say, so-and-so misbehaved today, thank you very much, and hang up. That's not how it happens. Many times it's that in-depth phone call, that invite in to come in and sit down and have a meeting. Let's talk about what's transpiring, what's happening in the classroom. Here's what was said. Here's what the teacher has been doing to try to fix this. Can we all get on the same page? The parents aren't left out of that equation.
one of the things with chronic misbehavior or chronic discipline problems that you have is our response to intervention system, which RTI sometimes only gets looked at for people associated with academic needs of students, but it's really academic and behavioral needs of students. And it's meant to be that system where everybody's around the table problem solving for that child. And so to Ms. Clark's point, that's where that shared responsibility happens. Parents, campus people, sometimes people from central office, just like at a special ed meeting, you would have other experts available to you. There might be other experts there to develop a behavioral plan or an RTI plan for a student.
At the elementary level, the behavior intervention specialists often come and participate as members of that team as well.
Well, I think, Mr. Miller, it is a joint effort. Yep. I think teachers sometimes forget that they're ultimately responsible for the behavior in their classroom. And so some of them take that real serious, and the first time Johnny misbehaves, they're out. And some of them work in everything in between. And so what we're trying to get across is also that, and this is just historic practice, when a teacher refers a student, and I promise you, there are students that need to be referred. I mean, I don't care what kind of relationship you have with students. Sometimes if they do something egregious, they've got to go. But whenever they refer that student, they have washed their hands. They don't get a say in the next step of the action. And some of them don't like that, and that's normal, but that's just part of the process. And so really we're trying to build on different levels what this should look like. And it's not easy. We know it's not easy with our own kids, and every kid's different. I mean, the way I disciplined one son was very different than the other. I tried it the same, and it didn't work.
Amen.
So.
Amen.
Dr. Rogers, I might add, too, that, we have a varied level of experience of teachers, from first-year teachers to 25-plus years. And year after year, you develop a little more tools in your tool belt to handle things. And so the administration sees that varied level of experience in their building, and they have those reflective conversations differently with those different teachers.
Yeah. I'll just close with, again, I think you guys are doing a great job. I'm glad to hear about the parental thing. As you guys were here a couple months ago or something, I went back and I looked at that session that we had, and that speaker that day, I think, had a picture of 5 books. I bought all 5 books. I'd already read one. I read all the books. And the thing that bothered me the most was that it puts the full responsibility on the institution. And we have a heavy responsibility for access and equity, but that partnership with the custodial unit, the parents, whatever that looks like, and I'm glad to hear personal stories or indirect stories where it's successful, and again, whatever we can do to help with parents. We get this all the time. You guys get this all the time. Parents are really at their wits' end. And some parents are just trying to get their kids to cope through some of this. And so whatever happens at school is on y'all, right? Because they're trying to get their kids through COVID, et cetera. So I'm excited to hear that you're working collaboratively with the parents on that, and look forward to seeing where this goes.
There is no doubt that the work has gotten more difficult.
Yeah.
Much more difficult.
Ms. Hassan, do you have anything?
Actually, Ms. Cox kind of asked my question as far as, how does this kind of get re-brought up to teachers and remain in the reminders to teachers to use this. But I guess as I was sitting here thinking, again, we haven't had the opportunity to visit classrooms this whole year, which I really miss. And but we did get to, I know at least last year, maybe the year before, witness. I was at an elementary school, and a teacher wanted me to see her little circle. Had all the kids sitting around, and they went around, and and was talking about how wonderful it was, and how the things that they would say sometimes. You're like, oh, okay, and also witnessed at least once. I think it was in a middle school, or maybe it was in high school. Of just the door greetings that they all do. I know we've kind of seen some. They've done some great videos of that, but. Even just stuff as basic as that, I think is just really great, and I'm excited, and I know y'all are too, to get it going again. So it's really important. Yeah.
Ms. Cox, anything else?
Yes, I just have a couple more follow-up questions. So I'm just thinking about this as a big picture, as you're talking about it, and is really one day enough to train restorative practices? I'm just putting a little question mark there, thinking in my head, this is a lot to take in and think about, and I'm just going to kind of ask them all the same, and you can jump in or answer however you want to. But the one day, especially for new teachers, how to handle scenarios. So what does that look like for a new teacher? And then our long-term subs, are we training them on restorative practices? Because to me, that's really important. And then the last thing is, I would hope that the principals, especially our new ones, getting trained, but are they having continuing meetings within their campuses as well on restorative practices? Because to me, as you kind of said, even though you look at the wheel there, it's all about scenarios. And you said it well, Mrs. Clark. Every child does not adapt. They adapt differently, or they respond differently to different things. That is so true. And sometimes you have to try different things, whether it might be a book study, or it might be let's go have lunch with the teacher today, or I don't know, different scenarios. So do you all run through those with the different campuses? Because, sharing does work. Going, hey, this really worked well for a student for me. Does that happen?
I don't know that I can speak campus to campus, but just a couple of things that may address your point. Would I love for us to have more than one day to do the training? Sure, but August is already like drinking from a fire hose, and new teachers coming into the profession, wow, it is a lot. And so I do think it's important that there's moderation. Initially, the training needs to be thorough but not overwhelming. I think the key is, what do we do ongoing to support that learning and to support those ideas and that mindset? And so that's something that we continue to work at, is what do we do at the beginning of each year? What do we offer them to use throughout the year? One of the things that I'm working on for them for the upcoming school year is strategies that they can utilize in their PLCs. You're already meeting together in those teams. Another key piece that I didn't mention earlier is I have asked the campus principals, as they get trained, to organize a campus restorative practices team. So this is their group of staff members who are going to lead those efforts, be models, be mentors, be cheerleaders even, if you will, the people that are really passionate about the work that can share that with others. And I asked them to be sure that that group is diverse in the sense of, it's not all admin or counselors or just your team leaders or your grade level leaders. This needs to be an opportunity for people to really lead in a different way and support that. And then those are the people that help roll out the training in August, the refresh training and the additional trainings throughout the year. And certainly there's room to grow that and sustain it, but that's just a couple of the pieces. I don't know if that answers.
Yeah, and what about the long-term subs?
So long-term subs get a little, subs in general get a little snippet. I do have a behavior management piece that goes into the sub training. So I give them just a little, snapshot of that mindset. It is something down the road we can look at adding along with our bus drivers. That is one of the things that's actually worked in some other places. It's amazing how many discipline issues happen on a bus. Mm-hmm. And so just the idea of the relationships and how you approach, kids when they're in the bus driver care. So that is another thing that's kind of on our long-term look is that group of people as well. And I also did, we didn't have it this year, but in the past when we had the paraprofessional conference, I did a piece for all of our clerical staff who don't have the opportunity to come to the full training.
And I know through work with Dr. Miller's office, selecting those new teacher mentors on campus, you know, the principals do a good job of selecting those to keep that the climate and the culture going with those new teachers, those first-year teachers.
Yeah, the whole first year, you know how we support first years for 3 years, the whole first year is on classroom management, getting to know the whole first year's.
Yes. I'm thinking that's got to be really scary. I mean, I'm a new teacher. I'm just trying to figure out how to teach and be in that classroom. I don't even know about restorative practices. So I think that's really important that, you know, they have some support for that.
There's no doubt that classroom management is the hardest skill for a young teacher to, and there's some experienced teachers that still struggle with it. So.
Okay.
I have brilliant colleagues on the board because they ask almost all of my questions. The only thing I would say that makes me such a fan of restorative practice is that it mainly focuses on adult behaviors. And it focuses on how adults can change their behavior to get a different result instead of trying to do what they've always done to get a different result out of a student or a child. So kudos. I loved this when I got the presentation back in 2018. Once again, I'm going to go back to my data question that if we're going to say this works, I'd like to be able to say that at a campus where we trained 100% of the staff, this is what we saw in just 2 years.
And I only had a couple of follow-ups, and these were just curiosity more so than anything else. Why only students grade 3 and up for the survey? Is it the piece where taking the survey would be difficult, I would imagine, for K-1-2?
Yes, we felt like it would be hard for them to, at that developmental level, answer the questions with fidelity without some adult support, and then does that skew your question responses?
Yeah, okay. And I just wanted to confirm that,
Yes.
that we just weren't dismissive of them. And then I know that that this is not a part of Lily Jackson, but they have their own program that they use, and many of us have seen that in action. And if that's not a restorative practice led type of piece, then am I mistaken? It's not this, but it is something that allows, I mean, to me, and when I was student teaching and doing my internship, I'd never I was told by a very wise teacher to never allow a student to see that I did not have the power of my classroom, but also do it in a way to let them believe that they had some power. And so when my students would try to buck me, you would lower your voice and you would just be kind. And when sometimes it would be, do you need a moment? Do you need to step out in the hall for a moment? And some kids would say yes. And they would go out in the hall. And I see that at Lily Jackson when they're allowed to go into that little bubble thing that they have.
Conscious discipline?
That's it, conscious discipline. Yes, okay.
And I agree with you. It's definitely in the similar mindset about the relationship and the expectations and all the things that go with restorative. Just a different approach for pre-K at their campus.
I can't imagine the benefits that we're going to see out of that program at Lily Jackson as those kids disperse across the district, because kids are their greatest peers pressure when it comes to just behavior, I think. And sometimes I think kids can teach kids in some ways of just noticing the behaviors of a student, how one's acting. So kudos to Lily Jackson, even though they weren't part of this tonight. I just wanted to say that. So, and thank you all so much. Does anybody have anything else?
I watched a session this week. It was, we get all these emails of things you can watch, and it was on COVID-19 and issues of equity and social emotional. And the thing that really jumped out at me, because we're talking about professional learning here, and I mean, you said August is drinking from a fire hose, and we've gone to some of those events, where we've seen the front end of it. And, Dr. Miller and Dr. Rapp and how you balance all this, what was clear from that session, what came out of it for me, a lot of important things. Professional learning. The key to success and how we transform, it's not the right word, we get from here, where we're at today in COVID, to next school year. Professional learning is going to play a huge role in filling the gaps in transitioning. It's going to look different, potentially, than it has in previous years. And so it's no small task, and we don't have to do it. It's not governance. You guys got to do it. But just want to recognize the importance of that. That's what stuck out with me in this social, and it was a really good session, by the way. But the importance of professional learning, and I just don't know how you got restorative practices. And I think Angie has to really, her perspective, the perspective of long-term subs, some of them have started to reach out to us. So you hear, well, they feel some gaps, right? That I don't know how you guys can fill, because you got, you're trying to get them, in their teaching, you're trying to teach them other things, subject matter, et cetera. So I know professional learning is going to be a big topic of discussion. You guys are probably going to do some revamping. So just look forward to hearing about that in the future.
On one quick note, just again, thank you on the permanent subs for this year, because they actually, many of them were in place in time to participate in the campus training at the start of the school year. And that's the first time we've been able to do that, and I think that was huge for campus consistency.
Okay. Nothing else? Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
And we will move on now to finance report. Mr. Youngs.
So we're going to just ask Mr. Fight.
He's coming.
There he is.
There he is.
Come up, talk about 3 GMPs, and then updates on fine arts.
All right, good evening. So I've got 4 items tonight, as Dr. Rogers mentioned. If it's okay, I'd like to kind of combine the first 2. So the first one is the guaranteed maximum price for the Wellington Elementary School 20-year refresh project, and the second one is the GMP for the Wellington Elementary playground replacement. So just like we did last month with Homestead, we separated these into 2 GMPs. The reason being, after the first summer, we're able to kind of close the playground project out and get retainage paid and any savings returned to the district. So with both of these, Core Construction is the construction manager at risk. Stantec is the architect. Both of these projects are in budget. And as usual, the GMP process was presented to the board in February of 2018. We followed that process. Both of these projects have been advertised and competitively bid to subcontractors. Core has scoped those bids and provided a GMP for both projects. The 20-year refresh is a 2-summer project. It's a ceiling up first summer and below ceiling second summer approach. The guaranteed maximum price for that 20-year refresh is $9,463,710. And the playground GMP, the playground is a typical playground replacement. It'll occur this summer. There is no pre-K playground associated. It's just the main playground. There is an existing shade structure that we're leaving in place and working around, and the guaranteed maximum price for that project is $186,995. So both of these items will be brought back next Monday night as consent items for your consideration. And with that, I'll answer any questions you may have on these 2.
Do we have any questions? And we'll start with Mr. Miller.
I don't have any questions on these. I was just thinking about something recently where some parents were texting me, kindergarten, and they were in a PTA meeting, and it's a virtual one, and they're raising money for playground equipment and that type of thing. Do most of the campuses know and the PTAs know that they really don't have to do that? I mean, we're going to absorb that responsibility if we have to from an equity perspective.
So
we haven't made that official notification. We did have discussions. I think, Mr. Miller, I know you and the board will recall that that's absolutely something that we need to consider, whether or not we want that as part of the ed spec. And of course, that's a big undertaking, because not only do you have to try to figure out how do you put shade covers that aren't there, but then you're going to have to take up the program of replacing those after a certain period of time. So it's absolutely something I think the board should consider, possibly with real estate proceeds or whatever. That's one of the items that we have, but we have not said, hey, to the PTA council, hey, for sure LISD is going to do that yet.
Well, maybe for future discussions, I'm thinking about equity issues, right? And so, we think about the library discussions. We have libraries that have a lot of money, right? We have tennis teams that carry over a significant amount of money in their boosters, and yet we have some tennis teams where kids are sharing rackets, right? And that when I hear about a PTA raising money, which I appreciate, and it's happened since my kids were at Flowermont Elementary, right? So this has been going on. I just wonder if it might be something that we can offload them, and they could raise money that some they could give away to maybe schools that need better libraries, right? No, I'm seriously, right? Where we can create some balance there. So it's really not this item, but this item makes me think about whose responsibility is it, right? We certainly would never want the best shaded campus to be the one that just has a PTA that can raise the most money. And I don't think that's what we intend to do or that we really do. But that's what it kind of jumps out. If we could think about that in the future, maybe that would be helpful.
No, I absolutely agree that we need to consider it. That's why I think I actually brought it up. On the flip side, I think we have to be careful, and not talking about shade covers, but just in general. We will never be able to provide total equity across sports and stuff. I mean, we cannot subsidize what booster clubs and things do. I mean, there's just no way. So we've got to agree what's the level that the district will take care of, and then try to help out in other ways. But shade covers, I mean, every morning I drive by DeGan Elementary School, and it just bothers me that, that I passed two other schools that have them in DeGan. Now, it could be that the PTA decided that there was something more important than a shade cover to provide, but I think it's absolutely a question we have to discuss.
Mrs. Sun?
No questions.
Ms. Cox?
I do have a question. It's kind of a crazy question, but I just started thinking about it because it was Wellington, which is one of our larger campuses. So I'm just curious, with some of our schools, we have different numbers, different campuses. Is there a rubric or something for the playground? Because if you put your typical playground in there, I don't think all those kids can play on it. And, do we pick a number, or, oh, you get a turn now, or how does that work with a larger campus?
Right, it's a great question, and actually, so no, we have a standard playground that we use across all the campuses. So I mean, actually, never had that question come up before. It's a great question.
It's a wristband.
So we don't have So we don't have an ed spec for playgrounds, because
it doesn't allow the playground to grow per the campus's population, so to speak. So you don't, just because you got a larger campus, we don't give you a larger playground, right? So everybody gets the same playground.
But don't they get two playgrounds, one for the little kids?
If they have a pre-K program, they get a pre-K
program.
playground, right.
So are you you're not replacing the pre-K, you're just replacing...
Correct. If they have a pre-K, and if they have a pre-K playground already and they still have the program and it's called out in the assessment document, then it is replaced. This particular campus, there is no more pre-K program, I believe, at Wellington. So.
But they still have that place set there.
They do, yes. I don't believe that was ever I think it was one of those ones that was purchased, right? So it didn't really match the same standard. We're leaving it there, but it's not. We're not replacing it with this project.
Well, I guess, Dr. Rogers, that would be a question I would really like to know from the campuses. Is their facility or what they have enough for the kids? Now, I know some kids will play ball because they've got a soccer thing out there, but I'd be really curious to know, do our kids all have opportunities to play? Because honestly, that time is really important for kids to get that energy out before you come back to eat or in the classroom, whatever.
Yeah, I think to balance that, Ms. Cox, the difficulty is we need to be careful about does that mean then that we build a twice as big of a band hall at Flower Mound High School because they have 500 band members? And I think we have to be careful about making.
No,
So
I
I
get
think
it.
it's an excellent question that we'll
Curious.
sort through. I think we have to find what's that Goldilocks rule, what's
Right.
the right amount. But we can absolutely explore, maybe the easier answer is you just make a little bigger playground as the ed spec for all. Might be easier than trying to
Yeah.
perfect size fit.
Because
Because
enrollment's going to vary,
when I was a kid, I was going to monopolize the slide, so I didn't care if you were in line or not.
That's my point.
I know it is.
Anybody else have anything? And I will say that my daughter met some of her very best friends all the way through high school by waiting her turn at the swing. So I will tell you, and she absolutely did. And there's one little girl in particular that is how they met. They were waiting their turn on the swing in elementary school, and they went right on through high school as good friends. So
That's great.
nothing wrong about waiting your turn. It makes you talk to people. So, okay, so moving on.
All right. Excuse me. So my next item is the guaranteed maximum price for the stadium turf replacements at Flower Mound High School, Hebron High School, and the Colony High School project included in the 2017 bond. So this project, the CMAR is North Star Builders. Huckabee is the architect. This project is in budget. Again, the GMP process has been presented. We followed that process. Again, the project was advertised and competitively bid. North Star has scoped those bids and presented a GMP of $3,429,773. This will be a consent item on the agenda next week for your consideration. And this work will be completed this summer, all three of these turfs. And with that, I'll answer any questions you may have.
And Randy, about how are those fields 7 years old or?
I believe 8 is the lifespan
Okay.
on those. Yeah.
I know we try to get 7 to 8 years. I just
Right.
want to make sure.
Right. And associated with these is if there are long jump, triple jump, high jump, those associated events in the end zones and what those are part of this project. Either relocate those or redo those. So just wanted to mention that.
Okay, any questions starting with Ms. Lasan?
Nothing here.
Just one quick question. I always ask this, but are we going to have any delays with ordering?
I don't believe so, especially since we're coming in April. We had good participation with the sub bids, which means and these guys do this every summer. So I do not think we'll have any material delays with this one.
Ms. Brosnick?
Two. Number one, I'm really excited to see the Super H all one color on this middle of the Hebron field.
Right.
Secondly, are they going to be done in time for band in the summer?
So we're working with each campus to determine what the kind of the drop dead date
Right.
to be on that field is. Historically, it's been more the athletic conflict than the band, because a lot of times the bands are using the parking lots. But certainly we are working with each campus to make sure we're trying to get it in.
So do we think that we'll, since we're doing all three,
Yes.
assuming not at the
Yes, we feel like we will be
time.
done. Yes, and actually, so last summer, we were able to start that one a little earlier at LHS, but we got done pretty early. So, and when these companies come and bid, if it is awarded all to one company, they have different crews. They plan for that. So,
Ms. Hassett?
I would just say my senior football player had campaigned me to increase and have this done this year, and I failed to comply. He's very disappointed.
gotcha.
I thought you were going to say that he wanted a piece of the old turf.
Have we thought of doing that, of auctioning off some of the old?
We can absolutely do that. We'll put you in charge of that.
Do I get to keep the proceeds?
Mr.
Yeah,
Miller?
it is a fundraiser.
Did Mr. Miller have any questions?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
all right. So my final item, if I could call Ms. Drinkwater up here with me. So,
Come on up, Miss Drinkwater, and while you're doing that, I'll sort of set the stage. That's good for fine arts, right? When for the first time ever, and I know the board understands this, we created ed specs back in 2016, getting ready for, preparing for the 2017 bond, probably the two most difficult aspects to develop was fine arts and athletics. And part of that's due to a word I used this morning, and I promised I wouldn't, but really a little bit of the discombobulation of every campus is at a different place as far as how they've used existing spaces, or they've taken other spaces and turned it into something else. And then by wave of a magic wand of ed specs, we think we're going to totally equalize this in one go-round. And it's not possible. And it's been a good attempt, but I think what Mr. Fite is going to show is that there's some limits to what we're able to do in this first go-round, and then, of course, some budgetary issues. So with that terrible setup, go ahead, Randy.
Okay, no problem. So I don't have to do this too often. As you know, I usually come with GMPs. We're in budget. At this point in the 2017 bond, there's over 70 projects that are either completed or in process we have GMPs for. So, but we do have some challenges with the fine arts additions and renovations, and we want to kind of talk through that. So first of all, what was included in the bond as far as fine arts projects in the 2017 bond? So for the middle schools, there were 8 middle schools that had additions and renovations, and a total budget for those was $16 million roughly. 3 of those projects were completed in year 2. Those are substantially complete now. Year 3, those are in construction now, a delay in Huffines, and then we currently have 3 projects that are in design now for year 4. On the high schools, all of the 5 high schools had some form of project. The Colony and Marcus High School basically only had renovations called for. Flower Mound, Hebron, and Lewisville have an addition and renovation. The Colony High School is in construction currently along with their black box theater. Flower Mound, Hebron, and LHS are in design now with year 4. And the Marcus High School renovation is actually a future project. That's the only project in this entire package that's we haven't even touched yet. We haven't looked at yet. And then the final piece was the 2 black box additions. Again, the one at the Colony High School is in construction now, and the Hebron High School is in design now. $10.3 million budgeted for those 2 black box theaters. So that kind of gives you an idea of what we had, in the bond itself. So we have some, a few factors that are affecting our budgets on these projects. The first and probably the largest factor really is simply the way these projects were set up. And so Dr. Rogers mentioned, the idea of ed specs was kind of new, especially as it relates to the fine arts spaces. And so the approach was a little unique. We were developing the ed specs for fine arts in 2016. 5 years ago, and in preparation for our 2017 bond package. So the previous director of fine arts was engaged with helping to develop those ed specs, figure out what fine arts projects needed to be included in the bond. And so when it came to the additions, essentially the approach was to do an inventory of all the fine arts spaces existing in all the middle schools in the district and of all the high schools in the district. So you take that inventory, you know that some of the campuses have more space than they need. Some of them don't have enough space, and some of them are just right? So we developed an average square footage based on what we currently have in the district. We looked to make sure that was a successful, those were successful schools. They had successful spaces. And that became kind of the standard. So if you were below that average, that said that you need an addition, right? So you need X number of square feet to get up to that average. So that kind of explains the thinking behind the addition. So the direction regarding renovations was to use a flat square footage. So for middle schools, to use a flat 2,000 square foot for renovation, and for high schools to use a flat 3,500 square feet for renovation. So putting that in a table so that you can see what that looks like. This is the list of all 8 middle schools, all 5 high schools. These were the original planned addition square footages and renovation square footages. So you'll see on there, the Colony and Marcus I mentioned before, essentially they were above the line, right? So when it came to the average for high schools, the Colony and Marcus had what they needed, and so, but the others needed to be brought up to that level.
And let me jump in for a minute.
Sure.
So there was some science behind it. In other words, when I say we, they went through, and added up the square footage of all the spaces at all the middle schools and all, trying to get some number of, okay, how much square footage is there for fine arts at Flower Mountain? How much is there at Marcus? How much is there at LHS? The same way that they did for athletics. And I think the other thing that, folks around the table need to understand is 20 years ago, and this may shock y'all, not even all of our high schools had orchestra. Our middle schools sure didn't have orchestra. And, so some of these programs we've grown into, which is a good thing. We want kids to have opportunities for various things. But so that just adds to the difficulty of trying to figure out what's the right match and how much space we need at each school. And so, anyway.
Sure. Yeah, and the other resource that we had available, if you remember, Huckabee was one of our architects at the time, and they were they were assisting us with the entire EdSpec project, right? And so the thing with that is their database, right? Their hey, we know what this district over here did for their fine arts, and this district. Every district's a little bit different, right? So, certainly they added some input, they had some resources available, but it doesn't necessarily mean it was the right square footage for our district. So, okay, so again on the EdSpec, so here recently, as we started getting into these projects, let me take a step back. And so when you're planning a bond, you're not designing a project, right? So you're planning what are the needs across the entire district for this bond package. So you determine, okay, we're going to need an addition and renovation at, X campus. We're not then, bless you, we're not then pulling up that site plan, sitting with the architect and working on that specific campus and saying, where would this addition go? What goes in that addition? What are the constraints? That's the design. We're not in design yet. So having said that, once we started getting into design, we started noticing some issues, right? So Ms. Drinkwater's done a great job of, really doing an audit of our current ed specs and kind of looking at, every single individual space, right? And so which spaces, really lacked what they needed in our ed specs and which ones we needed to add some numbers to. She also was able to look and establish a consistent nomenclature across all the campuses. So you may have two campuses that just label, uniform storage. Well, she actually went out and said, okay, this is band uniform storage, this is choir uniform storage, these are all the spaces. And so through that, we have some revisions that have been suggested, and to make sure that all the programs are adequate size and to be successful. So when designing all these fine arts projects for this bond, and I've underlined it here, this is our lessons learned. The approach of using the set square footage, especially for the renovations, was not the best practice. And so we realize that now. Moving forward, we would not do it this way again, certainly. We've got to figure out a way to dive a little deeper without having to get in the weeds of design, because you can't do that in bond planning. So between band, orchestra, and choir, so those are your three major areas, right, in each one of your schools. Those are your large spaces, and inevitably there's going to be some renovations needed really in all three. And so I'll have an example here in a minute to show you what that looks like. But as such, the renovation square footages are much higher than we had originally planned. It's also, as I mentioned, unknown what that addition is really going to look like till you get into design. So this is the same table you saw a minute ago with the actuals put on there. So you'll see pretty much every project has been over on addition square footage and renovation square footage. And I will note a couple things here. So one, of course, Marcus High School is to be determined. That's because it's a future project. I have Hebron High School renovation as TBD because we really feel like there's going to be some overlap there between the 20-year refresh that was already going to be doing some work in that area. So let me give you an example of kind of what this looks like. So this is Creek Valley Middle School. It's one of our current designs this year. And so you'll see I've labeled the three large spaces, so band, choir, and orchestra. Well, this campus is pretty typical. All three of those spaces were under the ed spec numbers, right? None of them met ed specs. So we know we have, X number of square feet of addition to work with and 2,000 square feet of renovation. Well, one of those three programs can go in the addition, okay? So you pick one of those. You only have 2,000 square feet left to do your renovation if you stay to how we had planned. So that band hall alone is 3,000 square feet. It needs to be 3,000 square feet. So, you can't touch all the areas and bring them all up if you stick to how it was originally planned. So if you look at this this plan here where it shows band, that band hall would be the right size if those 3 little red boxes were removed. So the office, the storage, and the practice room. So that's essentially what we're doing. This next plan shows, this is the plan after going through design. You'll notice orchestra has been pulled out and it's in the addition, as well as the 3 rooms that were in band hall. Now your band hall is up to ed specs. Your orchestra is up to ed specs. Choir backfilled where orchestra was, which is a more usable size for choir. And now they also have their full ensemble room, which is called out in the ed specs that they never had before. So this is a perfect example of how you essentially renovate that entire area, really. And so when we walk away from this project, all those areas are now usable. They're up to ed spec, and we theoretically shouldn't have to come back and address anything there.
So, Randy, go back, though, to the slide to show, that slide. So explain about looking at Creek Valley going across,
Sure. So, Creek Valley, again, called for 2440 for the addition. We got 3905, and that's because you have the large orchestra space there with its support spaces, so practice rooms, offices. And then we also moved this little piece out into the addition in order to enlarge this band hall. So that's how that addition got to the size it did.
Yeah.
And then you see the renovation number 7411. Again, that's because you're renovating all of it. You're renovating everything else in that space. I mean, there's a couple of rooms you're not touching, but for the most part, all the rest of that fine arts area is being brought up to ed spec.
You renovated everything south of the addition.
Correct. Yes, sir.
The choir, ensemble, band.
And again, that's the plan. This is the design plan right now, so that we're bringing forth. So the second element that's affecting our budgets is storm shelter requirements. So back in 2016, we were aware of storm shelter requirements as it related to ground-up new construction for an elementary school, middle school, those types of things. Renovation or additions such as this, a 2,500 square foot addition on a fine arts wing, we were not anticipating a storm shelter. Since that time, new versions of the ICC 500 building code have come out. They've been adopted by the different cities. Each city has a different interpretation of those codes, and so as we sit with the cities and show them what our plans are for the projects, 3 have been identified to require a storm shelter, and so that's the Hebron High School Black Box Theater, Flower Mound High School Fine Arts Edition, and the Lamar Middle School Edition. So as you know from our project at Vickery Elementary, the cost per square foot of a storm shelter is considerably higher, almost twice as much as just standard construction. Now again, one thing I will note on here, the difference between Vickery, we built a shelter for the whole school. These will not be shelters for the whole school. These will be code minimum required shelter for the occupants of that immediate area. So it's important to note that. In order to really get a storm shelter for an entire high school, we really need to plan that out as a large area, and there's a lot of logistics involved with that. So the third factor, rising construction costs. I've been talking a little bit about this the last few weeks, and really this is something that's really kind of become hot here in 2021. Really, these are material cost increases. And so you may ask, well, we just talked about a GMP that was in budget. What happened to that? Well, a 20-year refresh, doesn't have. We're not replacing all the steel structure in the building. We're not replacing the steel. We're not knocking walls down and putting new steel studs, and we're not pouring concrete with rebar. So your steel prices are through the roof right now. Lumber is crazy right now. We don't use a lot of wood on our 20-year refreshes. So different things like that. They're just different elements. Now, these projects, new construction work like this, you're pouring slabs, you're building walls, you're building steel structure. These are exactly the types of projects that are impacted by these rising construction costs. So overall impact of moving forward. So with the help of Miss Drinkwater, so 2 things here. We're working with Miss Drinkwater to look at scope and square footage, right? So are there any opportunities to cut scope or cut square footage in these additions or renovations and still have a successful project? To this point, the answer is no, I believe. So if we cut square footage and scope, we're not going to meet ed spec, and so that's not our recommendation. Then I work with the architects and the contractors to say, okay, we do this on all of our projects. What opportunities do we have? What low-hanging fruit is out there to say, could we use a different material here, or, swap out something here? Well, the acoustic performance requirements for any of the, the band hall, the orchestra choir, take any one of them, are very specific. And so you can't just take the acoustic wall panels out, or take the, the instrument storage out, or swap it out for something subpar. We just don't have those opportunities on these projects to really make value engineering moves on these projects like that.
And so I'll jump in here. So really our options are limited. The first bullet is really not an option that's palatable to anyone, but it is something absolutely if we were forced to do, we could, and that is, hey, the band can only be this size. The choir can only be this size. We're not recommending that, please know. But that's certainly another option is, for instance, for the Lamar renovation is it also calls for an addition. We could not do that addition, but Lamar, one of the older middle schools, doesn't have an orchestra place. So I don't think that's really an option. We could do a smaller addition at Flower Mountain High School, but I don't think that's an option. So really, as I discussed earlier, I think while we don't like the additional cost, it's only going to be more expensive to wait and do it later. And so we're going to talk about what these projects are coming in, but we still believe that we can cover the cost, the increased cost on these projects because of savings from other projects. We'll continue, but poor Randy is going to have, every time he brings one of these in front of y'all, and Ms. Cox asks a question, which is a great question, legitimate question, are we in budget? He's going to have to say no on these projects as we proceed, and that's just the option. So go ahead, Randy.
Sure. So the next slide I'll hit really quick. He mentioned the Lamar Middle School. The only reason we brought up Lamar and Flower Mountain specifically was because in order to not do storm shelters at those two, you can either you can shrink the addition down to a size where it's not required, or not do the addition at Lamar. Again, we wouldn't recommend either one of those because they're not going to meet ed spec. You're still going to have to come back and remedy both of those. So I think this is our final slide here, yes. So the final slide, really, the overall impact from all the things we talked about, the ed specs, the renovation, square footage, all that, is a little under $12 million, so it's $11.8 million. Now, I will say these are based on our construction manager's estimates on progress sets, right? So DD and 50% CD. These aren't final drawings yet. They haven't been out to bid, so those numbers could change. They could change either way because with the rising construction costs. And it's also important to note that it's not $12 million on one specific project. It really is spread across all these. So I put in blue there, the middle school fine arts is 4.1 of that. That's 3 projects. One of those has a storm shelter. Flower Mountain High School's 2.7, that has a storm shelter. Hebron's 3.1, that's combined between the black box and the fine arts. And then LHS is 1.9 estimated. So as Dr. Rogers mentioned, we do, even I think last month we brought the Tech West savings of almost $1 million. We do that routinely. We bring savings back, and that's our goal. I would say, I cautiously say, it would be tight. I cautiously say I think we can scrounge up all of our nickels and come up with that 11.8. But I really do. I've done a lot of not only looking at what we have in hand, the projects that we've closed out, but ones that I anticipate closing out in the next few months, and how much contingency we have left, savings, all that kind of stuff. And I really feel like we're it's tight. It's right around that neighborhood. So. Also mentioned there are also additional funds and bond interest earnings, just throwing that out there. And so with that, I'll answer any questions. We have Ms. Drinkwater here to help me answer any specific fine arts program questions, and thank you very much for joining us.
And Ms. Sells, as the board knows, this isn't an action item. We just wanted to give the board context as we move forward with these projects of what's happening with the fine arts projects. And so really that was my purpose in asking Randy to come and update the board.
Okay, let's start with questions with Ms. Cox.
Can I ask all my questions, or?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. So, is this on the Monday night agenda?
It is not, no, so this was just a discussion item for us here tonight.
Okay, good, because I want it pulled off the table, because I mean, to me, I'm really worried about the budget for next year. I've addressed it with Dr. Rogers. I don't know what this is going to look like for the virtual learning, for, COVID restrictions or things we might need. And I mean, on the projects, I mean, it's not going to affect we're still going to have orchestra, correct? We're still going to have band, and this won't restrict them right now, not having that in place, correct, Mrs. Drinkwater? Or that won't hinder our programs, that's what I'm saying, not having this moving forward on the schedule that it's supposed to be on.
Yeah, the INS budget's not going to restrict us having programs, which are really part of the M&O budget. So, yeah, you're absolutely right on that.
Right, okay.
But it's not something that's on next week's budget. It's just, or next week's agenda. It's just providing some context as we move forward. And, of course, the board, if they want to give us some direction, you want us to scale it back, I'd be hesitant, on that, because it's going to cost us more 3 years from now than it is to move forward. But
Well, and I'm curious about that, because what the industry is stating is that if you'll just wait a year, I mean, right, the plants were closed down with COVID, so this is why, lumber and all those costs have been driven up, but they're not going to stay at those prices. I mean, they are going to come down because people are getting back to work and not having to work with, a smaller number. So, maybe that is the key. I mean, I know you're saying not to wait, but I think those prices are going to come back within level in about a year.
So keep in mind, with the with this bond, 2017 bond in particular, we actually added inflation every year. So you certainly have commodity, price increases on materials that do fluctuate, right? So steel can go up, 1 month, and 6 months later it's back down. But overall, we are seeing that the interest we built into this bond, right? So I don't know if you remember, as we shifted a project from year 1 to year 3 or year 3 to year 1, it changed the price of that project. That's because we had all that inflation built in. Those numbers have pretty much been kind of hitting. I mean, they have been true to what we thought they would be year after year. So I do think there will be, just like everything else we buy in our everyday lives, there will be consistent inflation cost over time. But yes, certainly, I mean, hopefully these, especially the lumber prices, hopefully come down sooner than later. I mean, it was definitely a knee-jerk reaction on the lumber. But steel is a little bit more out of our control in this industry because so much of it comes from other places. But yeah, we'll just have to see. So.
Okay, Ms. Presnick?
Well, I have pulled up the ed specs.
Right.
Because I got really curious. So, I'm pulling up, and this is the high school 10th grade, and I'm looking at orchestra. So I'm trying to understand. It says the minimum square foot is 2,000, one space, and the maximum occupancy is 30. So are you only saying there's 30 students in orchestra?
It's not saying that there are 30 students in orchestra. It's saying that the ed spec is outfitted to serve that number of students. So if you look at really any of the ed specs, we probably have quite a few of those where the number of students that are regularly going into those spaces will exceed, what's listed there.
That's kind of what I was
getting
at.
I think, Ms. Prodnick, when they created those, they were just sort of trying to put a number of, okay, what's a max, or, within reason, what's the maximum number of orchestra kids in a class for the ed spec, for an architect to sort of understand this. We don't live by that, both.
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of where I was trying to understand where that ed spec, where that number, those numbers and this numbers, came from. So I definitely think that we need to do an overhaul. And I think while we're looking at this, we need to look at some of our athletics and our other, we know what a classroom, but I think we need to look at some of those other things as well. And we're not so for example, the Hebron Black Box Theater, is that still 7,000 square feet?
Yes, so do you want to, so we looked at what was provided at Flowerman and Marcus. Do you want to speak on kind of the
The
black
Ed
box
spec
piece?
document that you're looking at lists the Black Box Theater as 7,000 square feet itself. However, we think that that may have been an error, that represented the number of square feet that were used in the entirety of the project at the other schools, because the existing black boxes at Flower Mound and Marcus around 2,700, 2,800.
Thought it was quite
so
large.
that number is just probably an error. And we did look forward to these other projects with the 2,700 in mind.
So now that we're in the design phase, that's my question. So are we designing at 2,700 square feet, or are we?
We are. So as Ms. Drinkwater mentioned, so that's.
Because that seemed really large. When I looked at that number,
right.
that seemed.
And so that includes everything that comes along with the black.
Yeah.
But typically, the black box theaters have also come with 1 or 2 classrooms as well, the restroom. So, and then the circulation space, hallways, and all that. So all that together, I think, is what they were going for with the 7,750. But yes, we have been making sure that at the Colony and Hebron that they're designed in a similar fashion to Marcus and Flower, which we think are successful black box theaters. So.
Well, it would be larger than I think the auditorium.
Yes, ma'am,
Right.
that's correct.
That is in there.
Would make sense.
So yeah, it would make sense. So I definitely think that this needs to be revamped and brought back to us, because I think that this is what we give architects, like it or not, to design off of. I'm not for changing anything. I think that, we have a 2 to 3% contingency fee in all of our construction projects, and that's it's almost $15 million by my very rough math for the entire bond project. And I think that would cover the estimated 11.8.
Okay, Ms. Hassett? Thank you for redoing the ed specs. I think that was great work. I appreciate the fact that you're trying to figure out how to do it. But my question really is enrollment. The district is more of a steady enrollment overall. Of course, we have pockets that are, so how are we then looking at ed specs in terms of a leveling off of enrollment to make sure that when we're designing and redoing the ed specs, that we're not designing for giant numbers, but the leveling off of the district?
Yes, ma'am. It's not as, the fine arts regulation play is not as consistent as a football field or a basketball court, if you will, but there is an appropriate assumption of a 6A high school band program, a 3C or a 2C middle school orchestra program or choir program. There's a reasonable assumption of, just based on the number of classes and staffing of a school, there is consistency there that can help guide what that largest classroom will look like during the school day. So we do have that information from other districts that helps, and we do recognize, for example, that most of our middle schools are double Cs now, not triple Cs, and so that probably helped change things just a little bit as well. But we also looked at the support spaces in a little different way, and the way those were listed for maybe some programs and not others. So that's gone into, if you put a 2,000 square foot choir room up here, you really have to put the uniform storage and everything that goes with that, and that wasn't maybe necessarily part of the package. So
Yeah, and I told myself that I wasn't going to bring up middle school orchestra, but I guess I messed that up. But I think, Ms. Hassett, we have to be careful about using low numbers and really high numbers. Because if we use low numbers, when we discussed middle school orchestra, we had some that, didn't even have a full teacher. So when it's time to renovate that space, do you build it for just that size and vice versa? Right now, Flower Mound Band is giant, but I don't think you can build something just for that band, because it may not always have 500 kids. So I think you have to find something in between, which is what Ms. Drinkwater's,
Right.
trying to figure out.
I greatly appreciate that. It just also,
Yeah.
that's kind of also how we got into this situation, by looking at averages.
You're right.
And so just want to make sure we're thinking long-term of enrollment while making sure the spaces are adequate for what we need as well. And then also about Mrs. Cox's question question. Right now, we're in design of these.
Correct.
So we're not really going to break ground or need materials for quite some time anyway.
Correct. So our original plan for these was to start construction this fall. So when you do an addition and renovation, ideally you want to come in, do the addition first, and you can do that during the school year. That's why we said start in the fall. And then hopefully follow up that next summer with the renovation. As you move into the addition, you move out of the old spaces, you can renovate those. So schedules are still a little bit at play. We'll have to see how all this impacts that. But yes, we weren't planning on coming back next week or even next month with the GMP on these. So
We have some time to sort of navigate and sort through it.
Yeah,
We just wanted to put it on your radar,
Right.
really, tonight.
Yeah, we're on the path. We're on the schedule now. We were on schedule to hopefully come back with an August GMP for approval or something like that. So we may have to delay a little bit. And the main thing, the architect has been at a little bit of a standstill on some of these because trying to answer the question, well, do we do an addition at Lamar? Or do we not? Do we just do renovation? Do we do the Flower Mound High School full project with storm shelter? Or do we not? And so some of those we really wanted to get in front of you guys and just bring up all these issues and say that, hey, we can if we're told, hey, go back and try to stick more to what the original plan, well, we can do that, but there certainly will be new projects coming in the future with the next bond. So we really feel like the best practice would be make sure we do the best job we can now with what we have. So.
And we should have some savings because we're bumped up to fifth-year programs with the interest that we might have, or the
a little bit. So one of those was LHS, and so it's one of the ones that's so really those savings are going right back into to that project, unfortunately. But yes, So the other two were a little bit smaller, Wellington Playground, and I think the tracks, those were pretty small. But yeah, unfortunately, the savings that we had on LHS are going to go right back into these projects. So, yeah.
Okay, Mr. Miller?
Understand the problem. Appreciate you guys bringing it forward and kind of assessing it. I'm caught between Ms. Cox and Ms. Prosnick on this. I think one of our problems in this board, we never say no. We almost always say yes. May not be unanimous, but we almost always say yes. And so what we do is we end up, we're like a major league and minor league teams. We always make sure the minor leagues have what the major leagues have. And so it begs the question from a program perspective, what are we doing to mitigate? Like, for example, what if we didn't do the middle schools? What suffers? Is there quantifiable numbers of students that won't get served? Are they not going to get as good a choir or orchestra as they are right now? Because I think that if we say we have $15 million left over, and $12 million is about about 1.2% of our total bond, we're going to use it all on this? Like, we still have other projects that we need contingency in. And so it would seem to me that a discussion about programs like we talked about before, and here's the other thing, the reality of the world that we're in, because municipalities have to do this, is at some point you have to say not everybody can be in it. That is not a violation of equity. It's not a violation of access. And what we keep doing is building and building, and what we're seeing is enrollment flattening in our district and no evidence that it's going to increase. And so we're going to build major league stadiums in minor league facilities. And the question is for what? So let's say use $12 million of the interest income, and I don't know if Mr. Youngs has the actual numbers, but what are our projections and surpluses based on the next couple of years of the bond, based on certain tax rate assumptions that we would apply and vote on? So if that comes back at $15 million and this takes $12 million.
And we can share that with you, Mr. Miller, before we bring these back. I get your point. I think, let me ask this question, because it does deal also with the integrity that we put in front of the voters. And so when we put these projects in front of the voters as part of the 2017 bond, I mean, did it say 8 middle school additions of fine arts, or was it specific to schools? Or
it specifically listed the schools. Yes,
that's what I thought, and I'm afraid that we need to have some integrity to what we told the voters particularly if in the near future, 2 years from now, whenever, the board decides to have another one, if we can't follow through, I mean, I as a voter would be concerned about that. So I totally get it. I think we're going to be okay, and we'll get Mr. Youngs to answer your question. It's an excellent question. I just think we'll all take a deep breath and let's look at what's going to happen by August and get you some more numbers and then sort through it. But I think we have to be careful. I mean, like I said, I do not want to go through middle school orchestra again. We talked about programs, and we couldn't even cut 3 programs that were small and probably made sense to combine back then. I mean, and so, and I have no problem with that. I think we have to be careful about talking about programs. I do believe, though, and we've discussed this, Ms. Drinkwater and I don't think you can always expect that, hey, another 100 kids show up for a program and you automatically have to have space for them. I think there are absolutely limits for a lot of reasons, whether it's instruments, whether it's whatever. I don't think you can just continue to build to fit the right size. So I agree with that.
So let me comment on the fidelity of the bond. I certainly don't want the impression to be that I don't think we should do that, not maintain the fidelity of that. And I was very clear about that back in 2017. It's important to understand from a legal perspective, there are abilities that boards have in bonds to make decisions. And we cannot say, as a matter of fidelity, no matter what it costs, we're going to spend $850 million because we said we would build these middle school facilities. There's not a voter in this district that would say, you guys did what you said you were going to do, because within the fidelity of the bond, what they expect is financial stewardship. And sometimes financial stewardship means that you have to be honest about where we're at, and we may not be able to do it because of whatever parameters. It is not a lack of fidelity to say we can't do what we said we did because there was an oversight here. That is honesty, right? So I just want to be clear that I'm not suggesting that we violate the fidelity of the bond, but there are provisions within this. And again, we can't say, as a matter of fidelity, we said we'd do all these things, and then what we do is we spend more than the $787 million.
Well, first off, we don't have more than $737 million. My point is, I think, first off, you're absolutely right. The board can decide not to do the projects. And we did that with the last bond because, if you remember, there were elementary school additions that were going to be built and they weren't needed anymore. And so we reused some of those funds for some different things out of the 08 bond. But I don't think it's I think our voters will understand, Mr. Miller, if you have $12 million worth of savings from these projects, but you need 11.8 over here to finish these projects and do it right. I think you and I as consumers do that all the time. I mean, and
I agree.
So,
if it's that,
yeah.
But see, here's.
We're not asking or expecting you to spend more than $737 million, I promise.
Right, but I think I need to see the whole picture.
Yeah.
I think everybody needs to see the whole picture.
Yeah.
Of course, if we can do it, we need to do it.
Yeah, and that's all we want to put on your radar tonight is, hey, there's a problem in the fine arts world. We think we have some options. We're going to bring you all the options.
And one of those options needs to be what we've done to look at the programs, to look at classroom flows, scheduling, those types of things that may be ways to handle. Again, we don't say no. Think about it. We're one of the only North Texas political subdivisions that almost never says no to big projects. And we're going to be in a position in the next 5 years where we're going to be measured on, and I won't be on the board then, but how we say no appropriately. We cannot continue to do everything. And so I'm not saying we shouldn't do it. I'm saying that we need to have very thoughtful plan that we have looked at how we're going to do the programs, what we could do if we didn't build, a 4,000 square foot thing. I mean, for example, if you got one where you have to build a storm shelter, what if you reduce it to size you didn't have to? What is it really going to do to the program? Is it storm shelter size really going to affect that program such that there's not a high degree of quality, whether it's orchestra? Those are the types of things that I think need to come out here, because it is going to deplete almost everything that we have. And that, by the way, in the 2008 bond, we didn't go to that level of depletion this early. We would be depleting these reserves pretty quickly. And
there's two different. There's the savings from other projects, which we think will cover this, and then there's a separate reserve. So we're not depleting both of those. Right. All right. So we'll get you the numbers.
Thank you.
I think it might be helpful, and we'll have to relax the orange level mitigation for maybe you ought to see some of these, and sort of understand.
Great idea.
I'd love that.
The limitations. And I also want to be clear, LISD has never, in my time here, and I've been around a while, built the Taj Mahal. We built very nice facilities for band, for athletics, for our kids and class. Never, and these are not Taj Mahal things. These are just good fine art spaces. So, but I think it might be helpful for Mr. Miller, because it is for me too. I mean, I promise you, every time someone asks me for something at a campus, like, okay, I'm going to have to go over there. I need to see what they're asking.
That'd be
so
great.
It might be helpful for that.
Thank you.
Mr. Miller, I do take exception that we are a board that never says no. I would say that we just say no before it gets here.
I would agree.
I don't agree.
I would agree.
I think we added $40 million to the bond. We didn't need to. And we just don't have many examples, and I'm not trying to be argumentative, where we say no. We almost always say yes to most programs and facilities that are brought before us. We may whittle them down, but we almost always say yes.
I would agree with Ms. Prosnick.
I'm sorry?
I would agree with Ms. Prosnick.
I mean, I think the facts speak for themselves, so.
I agree.
If I might go ahead with my questions.
Go ahead, Ms. LaFawn.
I was on the planning committee. I was on the community bond committee that came up with all these projects. And so I'm thinking back, I'm traveling back in time to, when we were doing all this and trying to remember what happened. And I have to say, because you were talking about, Ms. Drinkwater helping you, come up with some of these things. And so I was like, when did Ms. Drinkwater become the fine arts director? And it wasn't until 2017, so it wasn't in late 2017, right? And so you weren't even part of this process to help, with these details. So to me, that kind of helped me go, okay, that was, it can't be helped. I guess as someone who sat on that committee, who was part of that work, I mean, and, gosh, we met for 80 hours total, I think? It was a lot. I mean, we were up here a lot. And so, it was very informative. I actually really enjoyed it, but it was a lot of work. And so thinking about it, I guess as someone who sat in here on that committee, for all the planning and everything that went into it, I kind of expected, you just expect things to not always go the way you plan, And so to me, to hear that this is happening, especially knowing now that, you weren't a part of the process, I guess to me, it's not completely unexpected. Yes, it's a lot of money, but if we have the funds to take care of that, with savings, because you've done a great job, with some savings, I don't have a problem with it, because again, I want all of our schools to, have the same, facility. I mean, that's important to me. And I have actually seen this summer, before school started, I did see the Briar Hill renovation, so it wasn't completely done. It was dust everywhere still. But I mean, as a parent of a kid with that went there, you could definitely see the difference, and that they need that space. And really, when you look at it, it's not anything crazy. I mean, it's really not. I mean, it makes a lot of sense. It's just some new rooms, some new bigger rooms that make a lot of sense. So I guess, so all that being said, I think that we absolutely should, go forward with it. Like you said, I do want to see the numbers. I mean, that'll make, I think, us all feel better about it. But anyway, that's one thought. The other thought that I had about the storm shelters, so you said, Flower Mound, and what was the other city?
Carrollton.
Carrollton.
Yes, ma'am.
So would it behoove us, as we're making these renovations, are we making a renovation in Lewisville that is not requiring a storm shelter?
Correct.
I mean, so this adds more money to it, but I mean, should we consider putting in a storm shelter in these places that aren't being asked for? I mean,
In my opinion would be, in the next bond, we plan for those types of, it's really hard to try and put, so Lewisville High School Stadium is a perfect example. Lewisville did require a storm shelter with those ancillary buildings, so we have a small, shelter over there. But again, when you put a small shelter like that, it's very, the amount of people that actually serves is pretty small, especially when you're talking about a large campus. So my opinion would be, if we want to have a storm shelter on every campus, it really needs to be a planned process to, I mentioned earlier the logistics. I mean, just think about Hebron High School, right? So you've got a 9th grade campus, you've got a field house way down there, you've got the main campus. When you push that button on the storm shelter and the doors come down, how do you account for that all of the students, and who's at the Career Center and who's not there? How do you account that everybody's inside and now's the time to push the button? I mean, there's a lot of logistics involved with that. So those would, we'd need to think through those and plan through those and have a lot more conversations about that, I think.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I was just throwing it out there.
Yeah, sure.
Nothing to be solved tonight, but just, a thought. So that was it. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Cox, anything else? No? And I think, just thank y'all for bringing this forward to us. My only question was along hers is, do we know that we're going to hopefully build these and they won't be included again for a 20-year refresh until that time? They'll be looked at, hopefully. And so wanting to be good stewards of our funds, making sure that what we're building is adequate. It's going to be what we need. And sometimes I know that those are questions we can't answer for 5-10 years down the road, but I do appreciate your diligence. I appreciate you admitting that the way we did things was wrong. Sometimes it's hard to come to this table and admit that, but thank you for walking us through the process of how you went to address that. And for me, I want to say that I do agree with Ms. Prosnick and Mr. Miller. The reason I agree was because I was on that facility commitment, and that facility committee. I'm very proud of the work that we did. I'm very proud of what we brought to the table. It was a huge binder that sat on my desk for weeks and weeks and weeks as we walked through those. And I think that for these projects, it is because we did such a great job, not only the facility committee, but the bond committee, and then the members of the board that were sitting here at that time, and now this board, in making sure that that document still lives. It's not something that just became irrelevant once it was published. It has been, and as we see, there's some more edits to do, but the reflection for us as a district should be one that we're proud of because of that district. We know we're not going out there and building what hasn't been looked at by countless people. And I can't remember how many people walked some of those campuses with me, and how many of us, even though I was only on the elementary, went out to high schools and junior highs because I wanted to be a part of the entire process, not just tunneled on my one assignment. And so I think that makes us different. I can't tell you how many times that as I sat in Leadership TASB, and those that you were in Leadership TASB can probably attest to, when you sit down and you talk to people and you talk about their facility plans, half the time they have no clue. They're just winging it. I mean, it's just slap it on the wall, you know? And so for us, I think that this is not a matter of whether we say yes or no. I think it's a matter of we have done our homework, and we started that process a long time ago. So for me, I'm proud of the work that's been done here, and so thank you both.
And Ms. Sells, I do believe, that we can provide some reassurance
Yes,
when we
absolutely.
get the numbers together. I think that's absolutely a fair request. And I also, just to reiterate what Randy said, looking back 6 or 5 years ago, which seems, but, it was a stab in the dark. But they had to come up with some figure, 2,000 square feet, to where we could then have a guesstimate of what that's going to cost for the fine arts package. And, what we've come to find out is that wasn't enough, And I appreciate Randy bringing it to my attention, which I know wasn't, fun for him to even do. And then, the bottom line is we need to bring it to your attention. And that's what we've done.
And we did not add this to the agenda to push this through on a hurried timeline. We brought it to the agenda because there were things that we saw that if it concerned Dr. Rogers and it concerned me, then it needed to be transparently brought to everybody around this table. And so that's why it was brought tonight, not to try to speed things up or anything.
And we'll have time, I think, as Randy said, to make decisions as these projects come in front of y'all to say, hey, we can't find, we can't find it for that product, so what are some options? And of course, we do have some other options to try to, but anyway, we'll leave it at that.
Okay. Well, is there any other further business?
The Marcus girls won their soccer game. Flower Mound was leading 1-0.
Nice.
I love those kind of
2-0.
Okay, thank you for that
2-0
update.
just now.
What was the big
That was
difference?
a great way to end the meeting. Well, if there's no further business,
That's the Marcus
this meeting
boy.
is adjourned, and the time is now 8:21 p.m. Thank you all.
It's like a region.
Thank y'all.
Randy.
Bye.
Thank you. It's all I got.
Okay. If you think about something to me, I'll
I need the key purchase.
All right, I'll find it.
Go Baylor.